welcome back to my coloring channel. Today I want to do a color along from Mythic World by Kerby Rosanes, and I'm choosing to do the first full spread, which is the Giant's Causeway page on pages 6 and 7. So this here, I'm imagining doing it as a bright noonday page, because I love the juxtaposition of these two super angry rival men throwing things at each other, creating this huge destruction, and yet it is a bright summery day with a blue sky and a greenish mountain in the backdrop. I think that juxtaposition will be really interesting in a very regular day in the middle of summer, maybe around noontime, and then these two giants start going at it. So to get started, I'm putting on my little art glove here. I know it looks really weird and like a backwards archer's glove, but it does really help make sure I don't smush the colors all over the page. So I'm beginning with the mountains in the background, and I'm using the Derwent Inktense lime color to begin. And so following Kerby Rosanes' lines, I'm just putting this in whatever area is the highlight or whatever is the whitest over here. And so this way, the highlights are very easily shown. Kerby Rosanes is a really easy artist in that sense, where you can really know where the shadows are supposed to go very easily. So a quick time lapse where I have finished that out. And now I'm coming in with the second color, which is Apple. It's slightly darker. And so for this one, I'm putting it mostly just underneath the lime color. And so that way it's light on top and then gradually gets a bit darker in color towards the bottom, and that way the highlights towards the top where the sun would most probably hit. Next up is Hooker's Green. So the exact same process over here, and I'm overlapping it slightly and then pulling it into that shadowy areas. And so the shadowy areas for me are all of the parts where Kerby Rosanes' lines are. But you'll notice that at this point, I'm still not going all the way into the shadows. And that's because when you look at photos of the Giant's Causeway, a lot of the mountain that's physically present is not completely covered in grass. A lot of it is actually still the bare rock showing through. And so with my darkest green, which is the Ionian Green, I'm pulling it down into where the rest of the grass should go. But then the remainder of this mountain, I've decided to make it that granite. And so I'm beginning with the lightest gray that Derwent has, and it's one of their new colors, the Stormdust. And again, because I want my shadows to be towards the bottom and my highlights towards the top, I'm putting that towards the top of that shaded area. And then bringing in some amber for wherever there's some natural dirt, and ending with Payne's gray for that darker granite. And this is being the final color, so it's covering the rest of that shaded area. So now when we're thinking in terms of how we can get this activated, we want to start with the lightest colors first and then go towards the darker colors and wipe quite often in between. This is so that the dark doesn't get pulled too far into the light to muddy the light, and that helps protect the highlights. It's actually a pretty slow process. Here's a video of me doing it in real time, but because I didn't want the entire video to be too long, most of this video is going to be in time lapse. But you can see over here the way in which the magic happens, where the color really does shift completely when you go that way. And because I have put down maybe around 10 different pencils here, it actually has a lot of pigment on the paper already. Sometimes with Derwent Inktense, you need to go over it several times to get a good depth of color, or you use it as a base with a prismacolor overlay. But because I have so many colors, I only really needed to go over those mountains once, and it's actually dark enough for me to be happy with and be complete. So now for the sky, I'm trying to create a bit of a gradient here. The top part of it's going to be the Derwent Inktense bright blue, and then go down towards the iris blue, the Malibu with a tiny bit of antique white towards the horizon. And that's because in general, when you look at the sky, it fades towards the horizon due to light pollution. So I'm putting down 2 to 3 layers of the color dry first. I'm really trying to build up as much pigment as possible when it's dry before I activate it, because that can help save me some time later. And you'll notice that when I'm activating it with water, I'm trying to start it from the bottom and move up, again trying to make sure that I'm pulling the pigment towards the dark area and not towards the light area, because that really does help preserve a sense of a gradient, and it does help preserve the the light highlights. And I switched to using a regular paintbrush because I wanted to see what it would be like to use a bit more water. I was hoping that making it a bit wetter will allow the pigment to move a bit more freely and therefore have fewer paint strokes, because then I'd be able to blend it out slightly. And it seems to be working fairly well so far when I look at it from this end, but I'll show you later it actually was too much water and it bled through. And with this larger area here, I was just experimenting between using the flat brush and the round brush, and then I went over the edges with the round brush, trying to get it, but because I was using the brush strokes in various directions inconsistently, like sometimes it was back and forth, sometimes it was front and back, there you can see the bleed through. Is I'm gonna have to fix that later. It's not the best sky gradient I've done, and it could really use a layer of either more color on top or prismacolor on top, but I'm just gonna let it be. And so now I'm coming into the clouds here, and because it's so pale and white, and I feel like I have a lot less control with Derwent Inktense, I actually decided to go all the way in with just my Prismacolors. And I was using 10, 20, and 30% cool gray plus a white Posca pen. You can kind of see how when you're using that Posca pen to take away the outlines of the lines, it really makes the clouds look a lot softer. And so I'm putting the 30% cool gray as my darkest in the shadow area, pulling it towards the 10%, and then using the Posca pen to get rid of the rest of the original line work, just so that it can be a bit of a softer cloud. And then I only recorded that one area, and you can kind of see it later on with both. So for the Giant's Causeway's really cool rocks formations over here, I'm using the Derwent Inktense Payne's Gray. I'm trying to do this as much in Inktense as possible, and I'm just putting it on the side where the shadow is. These are kind of rectangular pieces of stone, and so one area is highlighted, and you can imagine that's where the light is coming from. Sort of where you are as a viewer looking forward, and the other is in darkness. And so I'm just kind of following that pattern and did it all over the page on both sides. And you can see over here real time, it's actually a bit of a slow process. This whole video took me maybe like 5 hours to do and film, but it's a 13-minute video, go figure. And so holding the Stormdust all the way at the end helps make sure that it puts on a really light layer, and that allows me to have a bit more control in making sure I'm not putting too much pigment down, because I only want it to be very lightly gray. And I decided to put a tiny bit of green where it meets the ocean to kind of show how algae is growing up on the rocks, because that's what I've noticed as well in the photo reference that I had. So for the water, trying to preserve some of the wave froth highlights, I'm beginning with Iron Blue. In a moment, I'm going to be pulling in some bright blue and just a tiny bit of Payne's Gray here and there to make this a bit of a darker, stormier sea. And the water, if I was a bit more patient, I think I could have preserved the highlights a bit more, or maybe had a bit more variety, but it's okay the way it went. And here, because I had a tiny bit of that Stormdust on the highlight area, I was able to have a nice gradient and make them all look a bit gray. Later on, I went in with a Posca pen and just added extra contrast to the highlight area to kind of make it look a bit less samey. But again, I'm only coming in here pretty much with just 2 colors, and I went back to the paintbrush that you have water that gets filled in it, because it has a bit more water control, and that hopefully can make sure it won't bleed through the way that my paintbrush did. Alright, so here we're coming in with the water. It's kind of blending all the colors together, so there's really not that much depth that's being created, but it's also such a small area. I don't really feel the need to put in so much more depth than this. I'm aiming more just to have like a nice wash of color as a base, and have it kind of texture-wise match the rest of the page. And since everything is just with a single layer of Derwent Inktense, it's still bright enough for a single layer, which is really cool. And here you can see that there was no bleed through at all. So finally, to end with the giants, since I'm still, like I keep saying, not as familiar with control with the Derwent Inktense, I went to my regular coloring pencils to finish this off. So I'm using the beige first, and then I'm going to layer on top of it with peach and just kind of go back and forth between them and use a tiny bit of French gray for some of the shadow areas for his skin, and then use mostly yellow ochre and cream for the hair. But before I could get to the rest of it, here's my cat Karen. So she came, she wanted a cuddle, she got a cuddle, she decided to take over the whole page for a cuddle, and then she took a nap. And I didn't really feel like waking her, so she slept here for a good 15 minutes before she finally managed to wake up from the nap, and I felt a bit less guilty for taking her off so I could continue working on this page. And so yeah, so finishing it off with my second layer here for the skin, just trying to get it a bit darker. And then the yellow ochre for the hair. Since it's coming in from Scandinavia, they're probably all blonde and blue-eyed anyways, so I was kind of leaning into that. Used a bit of indigo blue for the tattoos, because I'm assuming that with natural dyes it might have a blue tint to it. And then a variety of different prismacolor cool grays for the metallic arm pieces, arm plate mail, one of those words. And now finally just coming in with some of the yellow ochre and then cream and French grays for the cloth. And then finally ending with the white Posca pen for highlights, especially to try to recreate the crest of the waves here, and then adding a tiny bit onto the stones themselves for wherever I had lost some of the highlight there to bring it back. And that's pretty much it, using one layer of Derwent Inktense only. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye!